Broadcasting from the Hip Hop Weekly studios, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Civic Cypher, where our mission is to foster allyship, empathy, and understanding. I'm your host, Ramses Ja.
He is Ramses Ja. I am Q Ward. You are listening to Civic Cypher.
Indeed you are. Welcome back to the show, Q. I have missed you terribly.
I'm tired. I'm about to change my zip code to 35,000 feet.
Listen, man, obviously, we've had a lot to talk about. For those that were able to tune into last week's episode, we thought it was appropriate to give you a follow-up to, the Israel-Hamas war, as it's being called. Just to check in with some people that we know that are more familiar with the goings-on than we are. And last week we had on Ami Horowitz, who was able to say his piece. He's a person who very much sympathizes with Israel's plight. I've admitted that since gaining more information, my sympathies have shifted more in favor of the Palestinian human beings who are suffering daily. And one person who has helped us tell this story so far is Suzanne Aslam, and she joins us again today. So welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
Of course. And for those that don't know, she is a human rights major, a former Miss Arab USA. She's an actress as well as an activist turned writer. And as an activist and a Palestinian American, she spent time in Palestine working with a peacekeeping team and has a deep personal understanding of the occupation. I implore you to follow her social media. I'll say it again, but I want to say it right now for those who are able to get to their devices. She is at The Activist. And I love that because I think it really does embody who she is and what she stands for. Now, before we get to that conversation, it's time to discuss some ebony excellence. Q, how does that sound?
I'm over here trying to go live, and Ramses wants to put me to work. So I guess I will go back to work. Shall we?
We shall.
This week's Ebony Excellence is brought to you by Actively Black. Visit activelyblack.com, where the good people there believe that there's greatness in our DNA.
We believe that too.
This is from the World Food Program, WFP.org, Washington, D.C. United Nations World Food Program, Goodwill Ambassador, and multi-platinum global recording artist The Weeknd is directing $2.5 million from his EXO humanitarian fund towards WFP's humanitarian response effort in Gaza. This donation, which equates to 4 million emergency meals, will fund 820 metric tons of food parcels that could feed more than 173,000 Palestinians for 2 weeks. The Weeknd's contribution comes at a critical moment in WFP's response effort as it races to feed more than 1 million Gazans on the verge of starvation. Since the crisis began on October 7th, WFP has provided food assistance to more than 856,000 Palestinians in coordination with other UN agencies and local and regional implementation partners. During the recent humanitarian pause in fighting, WFP has reached more than 121,000 people, including in hard-to-reach areas previously inaccessible within Gaza. Food assistance has included fresh bread, fortified date bars, canned food, wheat flour, pasta, tomato paste, and oil. WFP continues to move as many trucks as possible full of food and aid into Gaza during the humanitarian pause. Somebody's doing something.
Yeah.
Even though we wish we could all do so much more. Shout out to The Weeknd.
Yeah, man, that is a very special thing. And you know what? It feels like the right thing. It doesn't feel like any more than that. It's just the right thing to do. So ebony excellence is if I've ever seen it. Now, a lot of people had a lot to say about last week's episode. And, what we did was very much intentional. Ami is a person that comes onto the show and he shares his opinions, most of which we disagree with. But if we're not having conversations, we're not learning, we're not growing. So,
and we also cannot ever put ourselves in a position where our stance, our opinion, and our feelings are the only ones that matter.
Right.
We've seen people try to do that to us, and we've sworn never to put ourselves in that position of moral or intellectual superiority where only what we think and feel is what we'll present. But there's a such thing as truth, and that is very important to us as well.
So speaking of which, our special guest is here today. So you did hear.
I did.
The episode that we did last week with Ami Horowitz. And I know there was a few parts that may have stood out to you.
Yes.
I want to let you talk to us uninterrupted and give us your thoughts on the conversation that we had last week. And then we'll go from there in terms of additional questions. But you tell us what you heard that was right, wrong, needs clarification, clarity, nuance, etc.
Okay. Listening to that was really difficult for me because I'm listening to a person who essentially was dehumanizing my entire people. And this is pretty normal. We've heard this our entire lives. One of the things that he said is Israel feels a moral responsibility in terms of how it deals with its enemy. I have zero proof of this being true. There's nothing about what they do that's moral. The fact that they have to say we are the most moral army in the world, who says that unless they're actually trying to combat the narrative, the truth, in that they are not the most moral army in the world. I have no proof that they've ever been a moral army. I have proof that they have not been a moral army. They have violated every single international law that exists. So it's you can't just say things like that and expect that to be enough without any evidence underneath it. And all of the evidence is to the contrary.
I want to add something real quick, and not to throw you off, but there was a time when I did have a moment in that conversation where I asked him about the prevalence of videos that are being shown where there are Israeli soldiers dehumanizing these human beings. And it's like funny. And I remember him pushing back, sort of saying something like, well, these are kind of like individual actors. Right. And the point I think I was trying to make is that individual actors, you might see 6, 8, 10. When you see dozens and dozens and dozens, and they're making videos, I think it gives you more insight into the mentality of this group of individuals. So I think that kind of, for those who may not be as familiar, I wanted you to know that was where this part of the conversation come from, is because last week I did ask Ami about his feelings and the people that are very pro-Israel, their feelings about all of these videos coming up. And again, his position was that these are individual actors. And I think our position is more like, well, after a while, you start to get a sense of the mentality of the army. Because again, these are the people recording, meaning that this probably happens when the cameras aren't on as well, right?
It's really interesting that he would say, oh, they're individual actors and they can't be held responsible for the entire army. Yet everybody in Gaza is Hamas.
Ooh.
How does that work?
Keep talking.
That makes no sense. And he even said, and I'm jumping up a little bit, but he even said, when you were talking about the number of people who've died, he first of all questions the numbers, even though the Secretary of Defense in the United States of America has said it was 25,000 women and children. The Secretary of Defense, who is funding this genocide, gave that number.
It's a lot more than just the Secretary of Defense of the United States of America. There was an article, funnily enough, after Ami and I recorded. This is something that no one knows, and you're learning this in real time. But after that article came out, after Ami and I recorded, there was an article came out, and I believe it was Time magazine, that specifically said these numbers that are coming out of Gaza are real numbers. And then they had all of the sources that they listed, which many of the sources were indeed the sources that I used prior to going into that conversation with Ami, so as to eliminate that question of whether or not the numbers were valid. So to anybody that has an issue with the numbers.
Sorry, they're true.
Yeah. So that's that. So please continue.
So one of the other things that he said, and this one, man, cute in my blood boil. He brought up Golda Meir. And Golda Meir she was the 4th prime minister of Israel. Originally, her citizenship said Palestine. There's a video of her saying, I'm Palestinian. My citizenship says Palestine, but eventually she became the prime minister of Israel. this is her quote that he kind of loosely said. When peace comes, we will perhaps in time be able to forgive the Arabs for killing our sons, but it will be harder for us to forgive them for having forced us to kill their sons. That is gaslighting. That is international gaslighting. That is when a woman is sexually assaulted and we all go, yeah, but what were you wearing? It was your fault. Why were you in a dark alley? Why were you why were you it's you're victim blaming. And the fact that he was using that as like this profound thing, like you forced us to do this thing and we're just so distraught about it as we keep doing it happily, it's just so asinine. And in no other context in any other part of the world would this type of dialogue be acceptable. And I don't understand why it's acceptable when we talk about the Palestinians this way.
I want to add something here too. I know I want you to talk,
No,
but
please.
I think these things require context. First off, thank you for adding that, because I was not able to really heed the gravity of that statement until this very moment,
Mhm.
right? The other thing, and this is something that Ami and I were able to talk about kind of after the show, and again, for the benefit of our listeners, there is a question of, that distance that you put between the actions on the ground.
Mm.
So this is just a part of war. This is just how these things go.
Right.
They made us do it, to your point. And as soon as you flip that narrative over and you say, well, okay, so let's imagine if we're living in a world in 2023, 2024, where there are people picking body parts of little babies out of rubble and they're Jewish babies.
Mm-hmm.
So come up with the worst possible justification, the best possible justification for it. Is it still a conscionable thing? Is it unconscionable to you to live in a world where there are people picking out body parts of children that could not vote in an election? Because that's another big one,
Mhm.
right? Out of a pile of rubble. Could you live is there any justification for that? Period. Full stop. Right. And that's where that conversation breaks down. So I appreciate you making that point, and I will stop there. Please continue. I'll let you take it from here.
What people fail often to understand or don't like to talk about is when she said Golda Meir, which Ami used this quote, it's so hard for us to forgive those that forced us to kill their sons. We didn't force you to kill us. What are you talking about? You came onto our land, you took it violently, and then you got mad when we fought back. How is that? You're talking to a person where like their reality is so different than what we're actually experiencing that those conversations are really hard. It's why I didn't want to come here and talk to Ami in person, because our realities are so, so different. And he needs to live in that reality. And I live in the reality that I've actually seen, where my mom benefited from the World Food Program as a baby because they didn't have the means, because Israel is occupying them and committing ethnic cleansing and apartheid. They don't have the opportunities to go out and provide for their families. And yet it's somehow our fault that you killed our babies. Right now, there's a guy named, I think it's Ayman, I can't remember, Ayman Levy. He's the spokesperson for the state of Israel. He's young, he's good looking, he has a British accent, I think, if I remember correctly. And he sits there and he goes like, we will never forgive you for making us do this. Look what you made us do. And what a narrative that is. You made us kill 30,000 people.
You made us kill 30,000 of your people. We will never forgive you for it.
Right.
Wow.
This is the narrative that they've been saying since the fourth prime minister of Israel.
Again, the gravity, it hits different. That in a conversation with Ami, that's just kind of a passing comment, but to kind of hear it now, it's how it's been used to suggest that this whole thing is somehow the fault of
Yes.
people suffering.
And they're the victims. Like Israel is the victim constantly. And somehow they're the victim and the hero at the exact same time. And it's just the most amazing publicity stunt that you're ever going to see in your lifetime.
So speaking of which, let's if you've reached a good stopping point.
I'm at a good stopping point.
Okay. So talk to me a bit about what it might have felt like for you personally, for your family, for your people, that with your activism and the apertures you have into kind of the temperament of the Palestinian people. How has it felt to know that there is increased support and to see the numbers and the data that the support has shifted away from Israel in favor of Palestine?
It's incredibly emotional. There's one part of me, I have so many feelings. There's one part of me that is like, where have you guys been this entire time? Like we didn't just start talking about this 6 months ago. We've been talking about this. In fact, after October 7th happened, people were reaching out to me because they're like, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. Haven't you been talking about this? And I was like, yeah. So there's a part of me that's kind of angry because we weren't believed and heard. And there's another part of me that's like, look, it doesn't matter. Like, I don't care how we got here. I mean, I care, but I mean, we're here now and I'm so grateful for the support. And there are people that are like obsessing day and night, crying over these little kids who they have no connection to. And it's been really heartwarming and oftentimes they're the ones leading the charge and they're the ones going on protests. It's been really, really beautiful. And there's something about Palestine, and I think I said this on the last show I was on here, that is spiritually and energetically powerful, that has brought people to a new level of consciousness and awareness. And there's this awakening that is happening, particularly among young people, which is why they want to ban TikTok. People think it's about China. It is not about China. It's a great cover. It's a great cover because we love China as an enemy. It's not. It's about the fact, and they've said this. It's so weird because sometimes they're really savvy Israeli politicians, and sometimes they're just really blunt and honest. And they have gone on record saying that the narrative has shifted and they're trying to control it.
Mm-hmm. That's from the ADL.
Yeah.
And that's true of politicians in general. We've seen a shift change where they no longer feel the need to be savvy. They can be blunt and say these things that would have been frowned upon before because they see that there's a sentiment in their base where those things aren't frowned upon anymore. So they don't feel the need to disguise them and use colorful language. They say what they feel with their chest now because they're followers, as I call them, and their base, they stand with them in unison in their beliefs. So they feel they have the power to actually say what they mean now. So they don't get as savvy or as
It's true.
They don't do the intellectual gymnastics that they used.
They're not doing the whole diplomatic thing. Yeah. One of the things Ami said is, this is not a perfect quote. It kills us that there are these children, civilians and innocent civilians that are dying. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't, because Israeli politicians are on record in public without any shame or any, they're not saying this, hidden. It's not like a hot mic. They're just going out and saying there are no innocent people in Gaza. Mm-hmm. There are no innocent children in Gaza. They want to resettle Gaza. They're being very open with their genocidal intent. Let's believe them.
There's something else there too when they talk about what they're doing amongst themselves, or when it comes from there, it doesn't seem like there's a problem. But when we're a media outlet, we're a media organization. When media organizations, because we watch this, right? When media organizations push back, then it's a problem. Here, let me paint the picture a little bit better for you. There's a statement that we were told early on is anti-Semitic, and that statement is, from the river to the sea.
I have a note on that.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me paint the picture for the listeners right quick. From the river to the sea, that's an anti-Semitic statement. Mm-hmm. So I was talking to Ami. I've talked to other Jewish people, not Jewish people. Jewish people are fine. I'm talking pro-Palestinian people that have a fundamentally different opinion.
I don't think that's what you meant.
Pro-Israel people. That's what I meant. Sorry about that. Now I'm confusing everybody. Okay. Pro-Israeli folks. Okay. So I'm told that is an anti-Semitic statement. Don't make that statement. Mm-hmm. Okay. No problem. I love Jewish people. If that hurts you, even if it just hurts you. I'm not even going to argue whether or not it's valid or whatever. If it hurts your feelings, then I don't need to say it. I can get my point across. I have enough words in my brain. We'll be fine. So I don't say it. I go to protest, Free Gaza, Pro-Palestine protest, that sort of stuff. And they have all the chants, right? And I say all the chants. And when they say from the river to the sea, I don't say that part. Because even though there's no Jewish people that I know that can hear me, this is a commitment that I've made. And I see the prime minister or whatever that guy's, what's his name?
Bibi, Benjamin Netanyahu,
Mm-hmm.
Prime Minister of Israel.
And then he says it on the news.
Yes, he does.
And then I told it to Ami, and Ami's like, I never.
He doesn't know about that?
Remember, if it's been a while since you have heard the episode, he was like, no, I didn't know that. Can you send me the video of it? So I sent him the video of it. But by then, of course, we weren't recording anymore. But
so not only
did
Bibi is the nickname that they give Benjamin Netanyahu. Okay. So not only did Bibi say that, but the Likud party, which is the political party that Bibi is under, it's, they're like Republican party. Okay. In 1979, in their party charter, or whatever it's called, they wrote, "The right of the Jewish people to the land of Israel is eternal and indisputable." And then they say some things. And then between the sea and the Jordan, there will only be Israeli sovereignty. Now, they're saying only Israeli sovereignty. All we're saying is we want freedom. But they initiated this quote. We just took it and we spun it to say we want freedom from those same locations, from the river to the sea. That's their invention, 1979.
One of the things that I'm increasingly coming to appreciate is that there are a lot of things, a lot of similarities between certainly Black Americans, but I think Black people and Palestinian people. And I've kind of known this for some months now, but the more I hear stories like this from you and from our other friend, Resistance is Beautiful, couldn't make it today, but God bless him. I hope he's flourishing, whatever he's doing.
A lot.
Yeah, he's doing the most. So shout out to him. But what I'm seeing is that there's a lot of similarities. What you mentioned is like, Black people were kind of famous for taking negative things and spinning it, as you mentioned, and turning it into a good thing. Not a good thing, but into our own thing. Right. And so, you know what? What I want to do is I want to talk more about that. And I do want to talk more with you about last week's conversation, just because having a response to it, I think that it helps our listeners really understand what it might feel like to be in your shoes, and more importantly, how to support. And so that's where we're going to go next.